I've made the decision with some of the sitcoms that I'm currently reviewing to no longer review individual episodes, but to review them in batches, generally half a season at a time, depending on the length of the season. I'm doing this mostly for the sitcoms where I don't really have an awful amount to say for each episode, but I still want to watch it. And unfortunately, the Doris Day Show is one such show. And this is not where I thought I'd be. Very briefly, absolutely obsessed with seasons 1 and 2. Season 3 was still pretty good. Season 4, things started to slide. Season 5, for the most part, so far, I'm halfway through, has been honestly pretty terrible. And there are some good moments, and I'll go through episodes 2 to 12. I've reviewed the first episode separately. And I will share some highlights, and I'll talk a little bit about what each of the episodes have in store, and I'll share some things that I don't love as well. But I don't have a tremendous amount to say, because I'm not enjoying it. I just don't think season 5 has any of the qualities that the earlier seasons have. There are a couple of good moments, again, I'll talk about them, but it really isn't great, and I'm heartbroken that that's the case. But maybe the second half of the season will pick up. But for now, I'll go through each of the episodes in turn. Season 5, Episode 2, The Great Talent Raid, directed by William Wyard. This is involving Doris getting a job offer for Prestige, and John offers her this job at Prestige, and Cyril, Bennett, and John are basically spending the episode fighting over Doris, and Doris ends up having to mediate. There are some positives. Doris said, and I thought this was quite sweet, and also I think very relatable in some ways, when Doris was given this offer, she said that Cy gave her start, so she feels loyal to today's world, so she doesn't feel like she can leave. But that's kind of any job or any career ever. Somebody at some point had to give you your start, and I don't think anybody should be expected to then stay at that company or with that person forever. So I think there was a small element of relatability there. I think most of us have felt like that at one point, and I rather liked that. And Cy also said something that I thought was quite interesting. If you are in a position like this with Doris, I can't remember actually who said this, it might have been Cy, somebody might have said it in the room with Cy, but they basically said that if Doris goes to this other job, Cy can give somebody else their big break and give them their start. So by leaving when you're ready to leave, you're actually making room for somebody else to have their big break. And I thought that was a really positive way of looking at it. Ultimately, Doris ends up staying, of course, but there are a couple of negatives that I don't like, and one's more important than the other. We have this restaurant scene where John and Cyril, or Cy Bennett, are both arguing. They're like negotiating over who gets what, and ultimately who gets Doris. But why can't Doris choose where she goes? Why does it have to be the decision of Cy Bennett and John? Why is it not down to Doris to decide where she works? So I didn't love that message. And also, there's this really ridiculous moment where Doris, they're using cups and things as negotiation, as representations of the things they're negotiating, so they're passing things back and forth, and Doris reaches behind her to get a sauce bottle, a ketchup bottle or something, and at some point, the diner behind her pops his head up to ask for the bottle of sauce back, and it's Billy DeWolf, who plays Mr. Jarvis, but she just says, "Here you are, sir," or "Sorry, sir," or something. There's no acknowledgement that this is Mr. Jarvis. And I don't understand. I don't understand why they would hire Billy DeWolf to play this random, unnamed character when he's already very well established as Mr. Jarvis. And it's not as if Mr. Jarvis came in season 5 and they just aired the episodes in the wrong order, because he's been a character in the previous season. So it was just really sloppy and just really ridiculous, and I thought it was stupid. The episode as a whole, not too bad, but not some not great moments. Then we have Season 5, Episode 3, Just a Misunderstanding. This is directed by Lee Phillips. And Doris is in need of some extra cash, so she takes a job as a nighttime radio show host called Misunderstanding. And she ends up falling asleep at Today's World because she's obviously moonlighting. She doesn't get to see much of Peter, and then when she does, she keeps falling asleep in odd places. I think there's a good message there about not overdoing it. Yes, sometimes it is necessary to take on extra shifts or a second job, but also if it's detrimental to your health and well-being and your ability to do your jobs, as we see with Doris, maybe that's not great. And we have a bit of a mystery. This was not a bad episode. We have a bit of a mystery as we wonder what will happen when Cy told Peter that Doris was not working at night at Today's World, because Doris didn't want to tell Peter either. And there's this suspense of, well, is Peter going to find out she's the radio host? How is he going to react? And he ends up hearing her on the radio, and Peter phoning in the radio to talk to Doris, I thought was a good idea. So, not a bad episode, no negatives. I didn't write down anything wrong with this episode. It definitely wasn't too bad, and I think we have some good messages in there as well. Then we have Season 5, Episode 4, The Press Secretary. This is directed by Richard Kynan, and we have Jonathan Rusk, played by Patrick O'Neill. He's the congressional candidate, and he asks Doris to be his press secretary. And the bulk of the episode was so boring. But then it got a little bit more interesting when Jonathan Rusk's wife came to Doris's apartment. This is Julie Adams playing Louise Rusk, and she thinks Doris is having an affair with her husband, and he was just having a nap, and then he took a shower, and yeah, it does look a little bit suspicious, but from that point on, which was basically the end of the episode, it wasn't too bad. So nothing necessarily wrong with it, just not the most interesting. Then we come to Peeping Tom, Season 5, Episode 5, Peeping Tom, directed by Mark Daniels. And Cy comes over and tells Doris he's up for Citizen of the Year. And while Doris is getting dressed and talking to Cy, she sees somebody with binoculars spying on her. And it does get quite intense. And Jackie and Cy are there to support her and make her feel safer. And kind of the final third, as we started to find out what was happening, it was just really boring. It was really dull. So it could have been a really suspenseful episode, but it wasn't anywhere near as dramatic as the setup made it seem like it was going to be. So not a great episode. It had its moments, but Peeping Tom in general was not that great. Then we come to Season 5, Episode 6, Forgive and Forget, directed by William Ward. And Doris writes an article in support of forgiving and forgetting after cheating. And this is from the woman's perspective. If your husband cheats, you should forgive and forget. And we do have perspectives here where a lot of the women are saying, no, what if we don't want that? What if we don't want to forgive them and be stuck in this loveless marriage? And to be honest, I was quite surprised that that was Doris's perspective. I am, of course, talking about Doris Martin, the character. I'm really surprised that that's her perspective. And I kind of don't agree with it. And honestly, the rest of the episode was really boring as well. Doris ultimately can't get hold of Peter, so she starts to suspect that he's cheating on her. And of course, if he is, he wasn't, but if he was, would she forgive and forget? And I think in that moment, Doris could kind of realise, well, actually, maybe it wouldn't be that easy. But I don't know. I don't buy that was Doris's initial perspective anyway. And it's also just a dull episode. So definitely another one that's not very good. We then have Season 5, Episode 7, Debt of Honour. This is directed by Peter Lawford. And Doris owes $1,100. And honestly, the bulk of the episode is really boring. We have a nice message about her friends coming together to be there for her to help her out. And we did have one moment. This is the only other thing I wrote down about this, but I really like this. We have a character called Wally, played by Ed Begley Jr. And he's proud of the fact he's growing a beard. What beard? There is nothing on his face at all. But Doris does something to make him feel better about himself, and she tells on him to Cyril Bennett because they're supposed to be clean-shaven and presentable in the office. So she tells Cy to give Wally into trouble for having a beard, even though he obviously doesn't have a beard. And it was nice, and Wally's response to that was really lovely as well. So the episode as a whole, really boring, but we definitely had a really nice moment with Wally there. I don't know if Wally's going to be in it much going forward, but I really hope so. I haven't looked ahead to see how often the character appears, but I quite liked Wally. We then have season 5, episode 8, Jimmy the Gent. This is directed by Mark Daniels. And it was okay. We have a different environment. Doris is desperate to get into the hospital to interview Jimmy Callahan, played by Walter Burke. And she's going to extreme measures to try and do this. The hospital environment I really liked. We have obviously different characters, medical professionals wandering around and things to make it a little bit more interesting. And then we get to see Doris as a nurse, and it was nice. The narrative itself was a little bit boring, but because we have this change of environment, a fresh location, and an element of unpredictability as well, it wasn't always clear where the episode would be going. I thought it was not too bad. Then we have season 5, episode 9, The Music Man, and this is horrendous. This is absolutely terrible. This is directed by William Wire. Doris is interviewing the singer Johnny Reb, played by Paul Hampden. And initially, we have this nice montage of their various dinner dates and appointments, and it just seems like Doris is interviewing somebody she admires absolutely fine. And then they are in a romantic relationship. She kisses him. What about Dr. Peter Lawrence? She was with Peter before this, and I did wonder, have they just ended the relationship with Dr. Lawrence without really making a big deal out of it? Doris has dated many people in the show, and they're just there for one episode and we never see them again. But I can confirm, having watched episodes after this one, that no, she's still in a relationship with Dr. Peter Lawrence. So why was she kissing Johnny Reb? I'm so confused. So just the fact that this episode exists is absolutely ridiculous. Maybe it was shown out of order. Maybe this was designed for a previous season. That wouldn't even make a lot of sense. I don't know. Maybe I haven't seen the end of the show. I haven't seen the second half, but maybe we get rid of... That sounds cruel. I don't want to get rid of him, but maybe something happens to Dr. Lawrence, and this episode was meant to air later in the season. That's the only way that this episode could exist without just being absolutely ridiculous. And they tried to make it really emotional. Doris got all upset and she said to Johnny Reb, "I love you, Johnny, but I'm not in love with you." And then we have this really somber ending, and it's like you've known him for an episode. We do have a bit of a passage of time. It's not in real time. But it's just the most ridiculous thing ever. Also, I don't like Johnny as a character. So The Music Man has to be not the worst episode of Doris Day Show. The worst episode is this is the end of season 4, where Doris is basically not even in the episode. That's the worst one, but The Music Man definitely comes a close second. Then we have season 5, episode 10, Defective Story, directed by Richard Kanan, and Doris wants to talk with the Soviet general to ask if he's going to defect or leave his homeland. And I don't care. I have nothing to say. This is yet another random person Doris is meeting, and they're attracted to her. And Cyril made a funny comment about his wife, or his former wife. That was fun. But other than that, I don't have anything to say. I didn't hate it as much as I expected, but I still didn't enjoy it. So Defective Story is just kind of flat. A little bit irritated that we have yet another person interested in Doris in a romantic way, but other than that, it's fine. I didn't really care for it, but it's not terrible. And then we have season 5, episode 11, The Co-Op. This is directed by Roger DeChowny, and Mr. Jarvis tells Doris that he's moving, as the landlord has died and the estate is selling the building to a conglomerate. And Doris suggests, why don't all of us tenants buy out the building? And we have this meeting with the tenants, and I'm wondering if we get to see the tenants more going forward, as I feel like that could open up a lot of avenues for different narratives. We have all of these different personalities living in the building, but up until this point, we've really only seen Mr. Jarvis, so maybe they'll appear going forward. And the meeting was quite good fun, and I loved how much Cy could not care less about Doris's apartment problems. I think if she were in a really difficult situation, he would care. But at the moment, it's not his problem, and his dismissive attitude is just so funny. I really enjoyed that. And ultimately what happens is quite good fun. Mr. Jarvis ends up buying the building, and he's raised the rent, And apparently he did seek counsel on that, and he was given permission to raise the rent. So he's not doing anything he shouldn't be. So they all, the tenants, starting with Doris, they decide to call him in the middle of the night with a problem that the landlord has to fix. And they just give him a whole bunch of landlord jobs, and it was good fun. I quite enjoyed it. And the last episode from this batch, season 5, episode 12, Anniversary Gift. This is also directed by Robert Downey, and I don't have a lot to say on this one. It's a pleasant episode, but I have basically no notes. It is the anniversary of Peter and Doris, so they are still together, and he buys her this beautiful car. It is absolutely gorgeous. Also, that's quite an extravagant anniversary gift, considering they haven't been together. Well, considering they haven't been together a tremendous amount of time, but also considering she was kissing somebody else a couple of episodes ago. And the car, it's gorgeous, but there are mechanical problems with it, and Doris is late to everything, and Cy Bennett's not amused about that either, and it's just all about the car, and I don't have anything else to say on that, really. But I enjoyed it. It was nice. It was a pleasant experience. It was problem-free. I have no issues with Anniversary Gift. So there are, obviously, a few good episodes in the first half of season 5, but it's just so sloppy, with Billy DeWolf playing the random not Mr. Jarvis character, and Doris randomly kissing and declaring her love for somebody else, even though she's not in love with that person, and it just doesn't make a lot of sense. Again, maybe that particular episode aired out of order, or maybe, I don't know, maybe they were going to go a different direction with Dr. Peter Lawrence, and then they retracted that. Who knows? If anybody does know, please feel free to tell me. This means I only have one more Doris Day Show video to watch, or to upload, rather. I will do the second half in a batch, and then I'm done with the show. I will watch it again, but honestly, unless the second half of season 5 is amazing, which I'm not expecting, when I rewatch the show, there's a very good chance I'll just stop at the end of season 4. Season 5 hasn't been very good. Even the good bits aren't exactly amazing. The Co-Op was pretty good, and Cy Bennett's, just Cy Bennett's attitude in general. If I remember rightly, it took me a little while to warm to his character, but now I love him. I think he's fantastic. Unfortunately, season 5 episodes 2 to 12 are not fantastic. There are some good moments, and I will go into the second half of season 5 of the Doris Day Show with an open mind. But based on these episodes, I'm definitely not expecting a tremendous amount.